Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Voices for Water Season 2. One of the most fascinating vicious cycles in our world is the relationship between water and energy. On one hand, water can be harnessed to create energy, but on the other, our never ending need for energy is also fast depleting water resources in our country. I spoke about this Nexus to Nitin Bassi, who is the program lead for water at CEEW, the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. Nitin played a key role in establishing the India EU Water Partnership, which is IEWP. He was also a key member of the Water Quality Task Force for River Ganga, set up by the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Before joining the council, Nitin worked with the International Water Management Institute and the Institute for Resource Analysis and Policy. My conversation with Nitin spanned the spectrum of the water energy relationship. We spoke about how this plays out in cities versus rural India, how government policies should approach the balancing act between energy and water needs, how developed countries address these challenges, and the role of civil societies, private organizations, and most importantly, us, the citizens. Welcome to Voices for Water, Nitin. How are you doing and where are you talking to us from?
Hi Karthik, as you know, I'm Nitin Bassi. I work with the Council on Energy and Environment and Water. We are a policy think tank based out of Delhi.
I mentioned your field of work in the introduction. The thing that I'm most fascinated about, and this is what I've been looking forward to in this discussion, is the connection between water and energy. Right in this show so far, we've spoken a lot about the challenges with water, water quality, the need to conserve it, what all we can do to ensure it's available to everyone, so on and so forth. But you've never discussed the connection between water and energy. So I'm very interested in knowing how you will describe it and tell us why it is important to talk about it.
Karthik, this is a kind of a very interesting thing to start with, and why I say so is that people think that it is a kind of a one-way dependence. That for one thing you need other one, but I would like to start by saying that it's quite mutual. So let me help you with few examples, which may be also of help to our listeners. Uh, we need water to produce energy.
Hmm.
So, for example, we have dams from where we generate hydropower. So, water is gushed through the turbines and electricity is generated, and which is evacuated to the grid. At the similar time, we also need energy to abstract water. So, a lot of the irrigated areas, there are these tube wells which are equipped with pump sets, and they run with energy to abstract water. So, as you will realize that on one side you need water to produce electricity. At the same time, you need electricity or energy source to run your pumps, which irrigate the field. So there is this kind of a mutual connection, and that is also why it is very important. So, for example, hydropower is considered as, let's say, a non-fossil fuel-based energy source when it is
Hmm.
producing energy. On the similar side, because a lot of energy is getting used to abstract groundwater, which supports irrigation and thus our food security. So, this is why the connection between water and energy is very, very important from both energy security point of view and from the food security point of view.
Understood. So it's more a loop than a linear connection, isn't it? If you were to look at the India story, my question has two parts. One um, is hydroelectric power a big part of our power generating system, so to say? And B, this whole nexus of water and energy, is it very different in India compared to some of the other parts of the globe?
When we talk about hydropower, I mean, of course, there was a time when dams were called as temples of modern India by our late Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. But of course, dams also had, kind of impacts when it comes to environment and, displacement of people because building up of dam need a reservoir need to be created, and for creation in that process, the some of the biodiversity might be lost. People need to be moved. So at one point of time, of course, we progressed a lot with dam development, and I think about 50 gigawatt of energy we are producing through hydropower. Now of late, considering that we have to move toward clean sources of energy, and anyways we are moving towards solar, we are moving towards wind. So in the same process, what government has done, I mean, there is a lot of focus on building, let's say, hydropower project which are lesser than 25 megawatts. And the reason is that they are mostly run-of-the-river projects where you don't need to have large storages, and thus the environmental and the social impact is less. So they still continue to play a role. It's not that they are not, but only thing is that getting such projects through, considering various aspects, and also to find the trade-off between that is increasingly getting difficult, and that is why we are moving to other sources such as solar and wind. So this is my take, but as I said, overall, about 50 gigawatt of energy we continue to get through hydropower. And what was your follow-up question to this?
Is this scenario very unique to India, or is this very? Do we mirror what's happening elsewhere in the globe fairly evenly?
See, what we have to see is that where are these energy demands being met? And each has its own, kind of a pros and cons. Now, let's take example of, other parts of the world where they already, when we do any kind of a, let's say, development of a water resources project, we name it as water resource development, because
Hmm.
we are developing infrastructure to utilize water. So, for example, consider US, or let's say maybe some parts of Europe, especially Spain and yeah, I think largely Spain. So you will find that a lot of these dam development there has taken place. Whatever maximum they wanted to kind of a build storage, that was already done. So India, I mean, given the scale of population that we had, I mean, we needed water security and we needed energy security. And that was the reason, we started developing these such infrastructure. But over a period of time, because in other countries, they already built, the level which they wanted to. So they started looking for the substitutes, because again, as I said, building more such projects means that you have to also counter a lot of resistance, from various impact angles, I would say. So those countries started moving towards alternate sources. For example, countries in Europe, like many countries are driving their energy from gas.
Hmm.
France is one country which is having a lot of these nuclear-based power plants. Uh, of course, energy needs are growing, and each country has to depend on it. In our country, we still remain largely coal-based, economy. And I think, I mean, even our some of our analysis also show that we cannot actually entirely get rid of the thermal power plants. Let's put in that
Hmm.
perspective.
Hmm.
But what we can do is we have to balance it, or what we call that we have to achieve the net zero status. So net zero status is nothing that you try to ensure that whatever carbon emissions that happens by any activity, so you are creating clean sources, or you are creating opportunities to sequester or absorb that carbon. So if you look at that trajectory, so maybe some countries have taken that already, considering the various kind of environmental and social angles, and India is also moving towards it, and that is why you will see whenever related to, especially related to energy, whenever the discussions happen at the global scale, it is the tone is always you have to phase down, you cannot phase it out. So
Hmm.
phase down is probably the word, not the phase out.
Understood. You spoke in your response to the previous question. You spoke about how this strains the natural resources. Um, And there is a conversation that I've often heard, when this has been discussed, especially from an Indian perspective, right? And the reason I asked the second part of the previous question was also because, we've spoken about water security so much, in previous episodes. So we understand how stark it is. The audience understands how stark the situation is. Given that, is the current situation, even though we are, like you said, moving away from our dependence on water as a source of energy, is the current situation, when you look at it from a urban versus rural lens, is that more over indexed towards urban, right? In the sense, the rural belt bears the brunt, to keep cities running, right, to keep the malls and the offices running. Is that a fair argument, you feel?
I mean, see, the requirements are different, I would say, right? And I was just looking at some data sets pertaining to energy use in our country. So of course, domestic uses and industries, they come on top, but even the irrigation needs was about 21% of the total electricity that was consumed in India in 2021.
Oh,
So
wow.
21% is not a small number. So I think if we talk about rural areas, it is more about access to electricity. So, and now, I mean, with various schemes which have been initiated by government, where almost all the let's say the villages have this connections. So it doesn't mean that the entire household in the village have connection, but they are connected, to some or other grid. I mean, grid connected supply is there. So I think the access is improved. But what happens is a lot of the electricity which is supplied for irrigation or which is supplied to farmers, it is supplied at a very subsidized rate or free of cost. So the discoms who are actually doing this, they also end up suffering a lot of losses, because what happens is that the subsidy amount which should be coming to them before the start of distribution, it comes after that, and there is always this time lag. So it is not that because rural areas are taking more electricity, or sorry, it's other way around. You ask, rural
Yeah,
areas
yeah.
are not getting the electricity, so that is why. I mean, because to meet the urban demand, it is happening. I would say it is first of all excess, and the second thing is, I mean, who actually is paying for the electricity? So the tendency is to, always ensure the services are provided in a reliable manner to a sector which is paying for it, right? So now, if you see many rural households in many states, they have done feeder segregation. So
Right.
many of these rural households now, they are also getting a continuous supply of electricity, which was not the case previously.
Sorry
So,
if I may
but as
interrupt
is,
your flow.
yeah.
Can you help us understand what feeder segregation means?
So feeder segregation is like you have different feeders which supply electricity for household consumption and for the agriculture purposes.
Okay. So you're separating those two out. Okay, understood.
Yeah, so many states are doing it. So it is one of the kind of a let's say intervention to improve the supply, and at the same time rationalize the electricity that is supplied for agriculture use.
Talking of rationalization, I just realized, the moment you said 20%, I was like, wow, that seems much higher than what I imagined. But then I also was like remembering, agriculture today is also around 20% of our GDP. So it seems to be in line with what's going on. But, Nathan, you start talking about how this is a loop and not a linear relationship, the relationship between water and energy. Um, what is the role of government policies in this? Are our current policies addressing these trade-offs you're talking about effectively? What are some of the challenges at a policy level?
Now let us try to understand, if we let's say pick up agriculture sector and try to understand what is happening in terms of uh, the groundwater which is being used using electricity. So, I mean, usually we term that as groundwater energy nexus. That how it is, operating at the field level. What we see is that, I mean, I shared with you that a lot of areas, this electricity is either supplied free or at a highly subsidized rate. Now, what happens? A farmer, they don't have any marginal cost of abstracting water, which means that even if they abstract more water, they are not paying anything extra, because either the electricity is subsidized, it's flat rate or free. So they continue to kind of a pump out groundwater if it is available. And that is the reason you will find that in many areas, especially if I talk about Punjab, Rajasthan, the groundwater abstraction is more than the recharge, which happens on an annual basis. So here actually we need policies which can address both groundwater usage and energy usage. So this is how we look at it. Now, to address this, so what can be your policies? So policies are targeted at both the sectors. I mean, one is to regulate groundwater use. That is one policy, and the second policy can also be to ensure that the energy or the electricity which is utilized is accounted for. Because right now what happens is, a lot of the areas, rural areas, especially the agricultural usage, the wells on which the pumps are installed, there are no meters, so you basically don't know how much of energy is getting consumed. So that is where you need policies which can address both these issues. So, for example, for groundwater regulation, India came out with a draft groundwater bill, and that groundwater bill was to be a kind of a framework for other states to adopt, to ensure that groundwater is abstracted within the safe limits, that we should not over extract it. So it first came in 1970s, by the way, and after that, some 5 to 6 revisions have happened. And till now, about 14 to 15 states in India has operationalized it, or let's say adopted and implemented the groundwater regulation. Which calls for which are those areas which are, let's say, not safe for groundwater abstraction. So they put certain limit there. The areas which are categorized as safe areas in terms of groundwater extraction. So they say that, okay, this is areas where you should be abstracting groundwater. So, but as I said, only 14 or 15 states have actually come out with this. Similarly, if we look at the policies, which government are trying to introduce. I mean, for example, one is metering, that let's try to meter a lot of these agriculture connection through smart meters. I mean, so I mean it reduces a lot of transaction costs. I mean, a person don't have to go to the field and measure it. You can do it remotely. But then, of course, there is a lot of resistance in the way, whether the metering should be done for agri wells, because there can be resistance. There is a lot of political economy which is engaged here. So these are, some areas where India has moved, but it will take some time. I mean, we are still not at a stage where we are able to address this issue together, and it requires much more, kind of a political ambition and political will to address the issue.
Like so many other issues we're grappling with, isn't it? But I'm amazed at the kind of data points we are trying to get, the granularity of it, right? um, how much of this is actually real today, like in terms of if you were to look at the amount of data we have on usage, attribution, and all of that? um, are we 50% there in terms of kind of data we need to make policy decisions, or is it lesser or more?
So Karthik, I will again try to restrict my conversation here to groundwater and energy, as we,
Understood.
as that is the topic that we wanted to discuss. Uh, See, I see this, issue being handled at two levels. So one is that what you mentioned, whether we have sufficient data for decision making, and also the granularity of the data. So I would say yes. I mean, now, especially for groundwater, India has improved its monitoring station network. The water levels are being measured in various regions. There is a proper assessment which is done, and now government has decided to increase the frequency of reporting of such data. So previously it was like sometimes 4 years or a gap of 2 years. Now they will be coming out with such data every year. There is a large scale projects which were initiated to map all the groundwater resources at a granular level. Similarly, regarding energy, you can find on an annual basis you get data specific to how much is capacity, how much is produced, what are the sources, where it was utilized. So these data sets are available.
Right.
So I think in this front we have done a very good progress, and we will continue to involve. Now we are moving more towards IoT based or remote based data generation, and a lot of these technological using a lot of technological advancement to account or gather such data sets. Definitely, I mean, as I said, agricultural pump sets not being metered. So, what exactly is being used at the end user level there remains an issue. One issue, if we want to be really critical of, where exactly the things are missing. Uh, the second component here is about the regulation. How you regulate energy usage, how you regulate groundwater usage, and this is where I think we need to do a bit more than what is being made at present. Whether in terms of regulations which can control groundwater abstraction, or whether in terms of how to account and kind of a control the energy which is being utilized for irrigation. Either we provide some energy quota which are based on the groundwater quota that you are given, or we simply try to provide a good quality energy based on the irrigation need of a particular agroecology. But as I said, all these requires a detailed analysis, and all these would need much more, kind of a level of engagement at all the levels, whether it's
Understood.
political, whether it's at the researcher side, and the other stakeholders that are engaged here.
But the kind of data points you said that we have access to, a layman like me, obviously, is very pleasantly surprised and very proud of the fact that we're able to do this, right, with all the challenges we have in our country. Also makes me think, we have always a very unique set of challenges, which are unique to most, developing nations. But when we look at developed countries, right, in the West, especially, are they doing it any better or differently? Are there any lessons that we can take from their journey?
Summary of what I have observed
Hmm.
across the world, and not necessarily naming one any particular country. For example, some countries they do have what they called as energy quota system. So, for example, they allocate a specific energy quota for abstracting groundwater, and and you have to pay for it. I mean, it's not that it is available for free. If you can utilize that energy quota, or let's say, let's put it like that, if you can meet your irrigation requirement using less energy than your allocated quota, then
Hmm.
the saved quota you can also sell. So they are generating these incentives, within this framework, in order to promote efficient use of water and also energy. So suppose there is another farmer who needs more water, but his energy quota is fixed, and he needs more energy to irrigate his fields. So he can always go and purchase it from a person who may not be needing that much energy to irrigate his fields. So this is a kind of a very interesting mechanism that you observe. In some other countries, they also assign, how much water you can abstract from the system.
Ah.
So, they do large scale basin level studies. They come out with a number, and based on the area and the farmers, which they want to target, they assign groundwater or water quota, and which is again, they install meter, and on the basis of your quota, you have to utilize water, and whatever you can't utilize as per your quota, you can sell that water to others. So such kind of a mechanism, they do exist. Uh, the moot point here is, I mean, in all these situations, what one observes is that, and these are examples from developed countries, uh, that electricity one is paying for. One is paying. I mean, it doesn't matter. Whether it is whether such utilities are able to recover the full cost, or
Hmm.
they are still subsidizing its use, but it is not supplied for free. For example,
Hmm.
you are
Hmm.
attaching some value to it, right? So I think this is something which needs to be seen, whether it can be an option in our country, especially areas where we have large land holdings, where the farmers are large. Of course, the farmers who have small land holdings, anyways, they are dependent on other farmers to irrigate their field, or they are dependent on public canals to irrigate their land holdings. But can we have a system, at least where you have large land holdings, where farmers are encouraged to pay, and the whole idea is not to burden them with some tariff structure, but encourage efficient use of energy and groundwater, because this is
Hmm.
going to be a concern going forward. It is already is. I told you that in many areas, for example, Rajasthan and Punjab, groundwater is already heavily exploited, overexploited.
Right.
And so how we can make more efficient use of water, so in the less quantity we are able to irrigate the same land, or we are able to get the same kind of a produce.
Understood. And even as I was asking that question, I was also aware of the fact that it's not like the West is doing a necessarily a fantastic job of this, given the recent happenings in California and all of that. In fact, one of the experts on the show a few episodes back in season one was also talking about how many of the challenges we have today in agriculture and irrigation, especially, is because we moved away from what was native, the way we used to do it, into a more British-led thinking, right? Um, anyway, moving on from this and going back to the policy discussion. One of the things, the more I research the subject, one of the things that keeps coming back is the PM Kusum program, KUSUM. I'm not pronouncing this for fear of mispronouncing it. Um, do you think this can change the way farmers irrigate and ultimately help in the conservation of groundwater? Can you throw more light on this program?
Yeah, see, I mean, at CEW, I mean, we have undertaken several study related to PM Kusum, and so just for the interest of the audience, so it has three components. Component A is basically using, let's say, a vacant lands or barren lands which farmers might own to, let's say, produce solar energy in a decentralized way. And there, it varies that how much of the capacity can be, plants, solar plants can be installed. Then there is a component B, which deals with replacing diesel pumps wherever the diesel pumps are used with the solar pumps. And the idea is to the idea is that, first of all, diesel usage generates carbon emissions. So the idea is to replace and reduce the carbon emissions. And then there is a component C. Component C is about replacement of grid connected electric wells. And now they have also added that wherever there are feeders which are supplying electricity, now they can also be solarized. So
Hmm.
this is the whole gamut of interventions that are there under PM Kusum. Now, PM Kusum, see it. I mean, it depends like which component are we talking about. So as I said, component A is more about generation of green or let's say non-fossil fuel based or renewable energy. Component B is about reducing the carbon emissions because anyways diesel pumps are used. Now component C, where we are replacing the grid connected electric wells with the solar pumps, it has different objectives. Now, one objective, of course, you are replacing electric pump with solar pump, so carbon emissions are getting controlled. The other is that what was happening is that in many areas, even the electric wells, what they get is not a reliable electricity supply. Because as I mentioned that they either do not pay for it or they pay very highly subsidized amount. So discoms have no incentive to ensure that a reliable electricity is supplied for such connections. So the idea was that, and then this electricity is supplied sometimes in the day, sometimes in the night. So the idea of giving the solar option was that you shift to daytime irrigation because solar will generate, and at the same time you are getting this, let's say, quality electricity supply for at least 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours for during which the sun is there and your solar irrigation pump is working. Now, what changes were made, like in many states, they started what we call net metering. So net metering is a way that so you have this solar connection, you have electric connection, both, and then whatever you are generating through solar, you are using to pump your groundwater. And if you are able to let's say achieve that irrigation, whatever the surplus electricity that you generate using the solar pumps, you can evacuate back to the grid. And then at the end of the month, based on the difference of evacuation that you have made and the electricity, because the electricity connection still remains, and the electricity that you have utilized, you have to only pay for the difference. So that was the whole idea of this undertaking this net metering. Now, the point is, it can work in certain places and it may also not work in other places. For example, if there is a still demand for water demand, and let's say not all farmers has opted for solar irrigation pumps, or they do not have a reliable electricity supply, they can go to these farmers who have solar irrigation pumps and ask for water, and they are ready to pay for that water. So if a solar pump adopter gets more money than he or she gets from the discom, the tendency would be to run the pump and supply water to the farmer who's paying more in terms of the running of the pump, because he's paying for the water whereas you
Correct.
are getting paid for the electricity. So in that case, the whole objective of improving water use efficiency goes away, because anyways you end up maybe abstracting more water than you were doing before, because now you have the solar pump which can operate. And in terms of adoption also varies across countries, sorry, across different states in India. So as I said, we have done some studies where we have looked at different economic, environmental, and social variables that actually influence adoption of the scheme. And I think one of the thing that also emerged is that for adoption of solar irrigation pump, still farmer has to pay 40% of the cost. So it is like 30% comes from central government, 30% comes from state government, and 40% is the farmer's contribution. And this is where resistance, why should I pay for that 40%?
Right.
In some states, government took care of that 40% and farmers were, very happy. Of course, they have to return it as a EMI, or I don't know whether, sometimes it is even waived off. So there are, such, kind of a limitation. So somewhere, that you will find adoption is quite good. let's say where the electricity is highly reliable, or maybe where the idea was to replace diesel pumps. But at some other places where the objectives were also to improve the efficient use of water, so they might not have been able to bring a lot of success in that sphere. So it still remains a quite a uncovered scheme. And here at CEW, in fact, we believe in generating field-based evidence. And I think this is where we would also like to generate more evidence to
Hmm.
support some of the hypotheses that I just explained, or some of the things that we see happening in the field.
Fascinating, the angle you take on this. As I'm listening to this, no, one of course is the at the face of it, what you're saying as water as a problem. And the second part of this, I'm also thinking this is an extraordinary amount of coordination between different central state ministries, right? Um, Talk to us a little bit about because at that we are not, pardon my cynicism, but as a country, we're not necessarily known for great collaboration between different government agencies, isn't it? How does that play out in reality?
No, no, you're very right. Actually, see, again, I won't name any specific state, or I mean, it's just a general observation that I have
Hmm.
based on last 17 years I've been working in this space. See what I mean, and you are very right. I mean, this coherence, or let's say convergence, that should be happening by default. It actually never happens. Uh, and what we see is that maybe each department, they have their own targets, they have their own things to achieve. And if you go and help others, then it won't be counted as your achievement. So this is one of the things that we find, that kind of maybe one of the things that hinders such cooperation. The other aspect is that I was doing some analysis, and I could figure out that water in India is at least handled by 17 different ministries, at
Wow.
least 17. You have urban development, you have Ministry of Jal Shakti, you have Ministry of Environment and Forest, Ministry of Industries, Ministry of Renewable Energy, transportation. So wherever you go, Ministry of Agriculture. So whatever you wherever you see, you will find water component. Somewhere it is there, because it is needed for your domestic uses, it is needed for agriculture purposes, it is needed for industries, and it is also needed for your transportation. The transportation that now India is going ahead and building a lot of waterways. Recently there was this a big river cruise that was inaugurated in India. So water is kind of a central to all these ministries. But what happens is that their objectives is very different. So and what also happens is that, as per our constitution, water is largely a state subject, and center only come into the picture if there are certain projects which needs to be built, where let's say the uh, either they are of national importance that they have to be built, so they take a call there, or there are disputes related to water sharing between states. So you might have heard about the Kaveri dispute,
Of
which was
course.
finally settled through the Supreme Court intervention. So center role comes in there. So state is largely responsible for development of water resources within their administrative boundary. Unfortunately, water doesn't understand the administration. They follow the hydrological boundary. Water follows it hydrological boundary. And that is where it is needed that different departments should come together and first of all try to assess how much water they need, right? And what is that water which is available in their domain, rather than designing project that we need this much water, we are designing this project. So you are going to create some impacts in the downstream, because you may, with the growth, with urban development, with industrial demand, agricultural demand, your water needs will anyways increase, and you keep on developing the projects and without realizing how much is actually your share, what share that you should be developing. So that is, a problem which is an interstate. Now, within a state itself, as I said, the different departments has to come together first of all to prepare such plans. Now this thing never happens. So, for example, the urban development department, they will always consider the norm. They will say, okay, for us, 150 liters per capita per day of water is needed to supply to a particular metropolitan city, and we will design our systems like that. Then a rural, maybe setup or a rural development department will come and they say, okay, in our area, 55 liter per capita per day is to be supplied. We will develop the schemes like that. So, but in the process, they are not looking at how much water is available,
Hmm.
and this is happening because of this lack of coordination. As I said, each department has their own mandate, their own targets to achieve, and so they would give priority to it rather than prioritizing what needs to be done at a larger scale.
It's I don't know what to say in response to that, right? Like we know the right thing to do, but we're not able to because of the rules we have, the processes we have created ourselves. Um, Again, I guess this is probably a never-ending discussion, so I don't want to go into that loop. But it is important for the audience to know the kind of challenges that we have when it comes to this. And thanks for breaking it down for us. Nitin, we usually end the episode by asking our expert two things. One, of course, is in this, what is the role of civil society? And more importantly, we want to leave the audience with one or two things that they can do from a personal perspective to make things better. So, both civil society and at a personal level, what can we do?
No, I think civil society, I mean, and I see civil society, also in through various lens. A civil society can be a group of researchers, they can be a group of development professionals, they can be informed citizens. This is how I look at civil society. What I understand is that, as you also mentioned, we know the issues. Right? We know the issues. Those who are following, if you follow a particular newspaper, if you follow a certain kind of a magazine, if you follow a certain kind of a narrative, you know what problems are. I think it will be useful if we can come up with solutions,
Hmm.
at various levels. Now, what can be those solutions? Now, I will just take example of this coordination issue. So, can civil society, I mean, or the development organizations, through their, work, through their engagement with different states at the central level, can they play a role to facilitate, to have these various institutions come at one place? And this is what we also try to do at CEW. So we have active engagement in 22 different states. We are also dealing actively at the central level, and we try to see how we can offer solutions which get traction both at the state and central level. And there, this facilitation role is very important, and facilitation for a solution. Uh, Otherwise, if you just keep on raising an issue which is known to everyone, I don't know we are going to make much headway. We will
Hmm.
only create a lot of noise about it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it is not good to do. It is also good to do. I mean, if something is not in cognizance of the administration, we should bring into the knowledge of or cognizance of administration. But at the same time, I mean, I think we also need to worry about the solution. We should help, government with the solution, and this is where the role of civil society is very important. On the personal aspect, I think this is where we have to do a lot of behavioral changes,
Hmm.
and I will go back and refer to the life mission which has been just taken up or announced by the PM. But what I would like to highlight is, so government has come out with the 75 items which a citizen should be performing. And it is in water sphere, it is how you're using energy, how you're using transport, how are you using appliances. So there are a lot of kind of items, very simple items, which have been listed out. For example, let's pick up some on water. I mean, the reject water which comes out from a RO, or let's say from your air condition, it can be reused, right? I mean, the water which comes out of air condition is actually very pure water, and you can use it for the cleaning purposes in the household. What reject from RO, depending on what TDS or total dissolved solids it has, it can
Mm.
be used to irrigate a plant which might be there in your home. So these are very kind of small initiatives, but if you think about the population of our country, this can become a big impact initiatives. So I think this is where a citizen can also play a role, that they need to be informed. We are living in a world where we'll be having this resource crunch now or in future. I mean, I think uh, at least I feel myself to be privileged to have access to a lot of resources. But the situation is not same for all the people in India. I mean, there are a lot of issues already in comes to access to resources and even availability of resources. Because the pace at which we are using them, they are not being generated at the same pace in the environment. And even if we can do such small initiatives, I think we can make a big impact to the environment, to the society, and also ensuring that we continue to develop, India continue to develop at the pace at which it wants to.
Wonderful. Nitin, thank you so much for your time. I think you've done the very difficult job of both giving us the stark reality, an idea of the stark reality, and breaking it down for us, but at the same time also giving us hope with a structured solution to some of these problems. I really appreciate your time in joining us, and good luck to all the efforts you're pursuing.
Thank you, Karthik. It was nice talking to you, and I look forward to maybe meeting you sometime soon. Thank you so much.
I would love that. Thank you so much. Look forward. Bye. That's it on episode 2 of season 2 of Voices for Water. If you like this episode, do check out season 1 of this show. You can find it on any of your favorite podcast platforms, including IBM Podcasts. Voices for Water is brought to you by the India Water Portal, a globally visited website for stories, knowledge, information, and news on rural and urban water in India. See you next week with another insightful conversation on India's water challenges. Thank you.